Welcome back to the Voices of AI Leadership, the podcast where we go beyond an idea and talk to builders and founders. I'm your host, Malti Vakalanka, co founder of Bio, a technology firm that has been at the intersection of data, enterprise, and cloud transformations. Today, we have a guest who is doing something which genuinely fascinated me. He's turning the restaurant phone voice AI system into a revenue generating engine. So, welcome, Vamsi Galigutta, founder of AI Voice HQ. So, Vamsi, welcome to the show. And yeah, it's all yours. Take it away.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I think it was super interesting that we connected via, the order that you wanted to place by calling the restaurant. It's such a coincidence. Yeah, very glad to be here on this show.
All right. Vamsi, your career really spanned across, multiple paths with IIT Madras, which is almost equivalent to the MIT out here, and Capital One for almost 15 years. So, what really prompted you to start this product actually?
Yeah. So yes, I mean, my wife keeps count of when I left Capital One. It was about 5 years ago. So the main reason for sort of leaving Capital One was even 5 years ago, I was actually seeing a sea change in how the technology was emerging. It was, of course, not LLMs back in the day, but it was more like, the machine learning algorithms were becoming more and more powerful. There was this thing called AlphaGo, which is like a program that Google had created that could play chess, that could play Go. There was, I think, a movie about it. It defeated the top rated Go player, which I think everybody thought was impossible for computers to do, right? And that was sort of like a wake up call for me. And I was like, hey, this thing is on a trajectory and this thing is going to sort of really take off. And luckily, that was also around the time when I got my green card. And I was like, hey, I need to hang off my own shingle. I need to sort of see where this, machine learning thing is going to go. Just to sort of step back, there were like two or three big revolutions. Like the web was a huge revolution, and then cloud was a huge revolution, and mobile was a huge revolution. And I think in our lifetime, we'll probably see three or four. I think AI is probably definitely one of those. And I think it's going to be as big or even bigger than the web, if you will, in terms of how
That is
much
very
impact
true. Yeah.
it will have. So I sort of started poking around things, and every couple of years, it's like, what is possible to do with the technologies that are emerging? And in early 2025, it was very clear to me that voice is going to be the next frontier, in the sense that it's a extremely high bandwidth medium, right? The speed with which I can actually speak and convey my ideas, it's harder to do it either via typing or through any other medium. So I think voice has sort of become a second rate or a second class medium after web took off. But I think with AI, it's going to move back to being a first class communication channel. And you should be now able to, in the next few years, I think, talk to your customer support, which is essentially a voice agent. In my case, call restaurants, place orders, and voice will become more and more mainstream just because it's such a natural and high bandwidth channel, if you will.
Right, right. No, that's thank you for that journey walkthrough, Vamsi. And especially, we've seen some stats where almost like $27,000 are every year lost purely from missed calls during peak hours. And it's not a staffing problem, it's a math problem. And you kind of decided to start on this product journey, especially with all your experience in Capital One on the risk modeling side. So definitely. So how did, I mean, I know you had multiple ventures and also had going to a B2 market intelligence. So, how did you approach mining and unstructured data at scale, pulling financial insights from messy sources, especially with
Oh, so you're talking about back in the Capital One days or like after Capital One?
in more or less in the voice intelligence, market intelligence space, right? It's like
Yeah.
especially, yeah,
Yeah. So the prior venture before this was essentially more focused on the market intelligence piece of it.
yeah,
And that's where like the state of the art was
I see.
back in 2024.
Okay,
Go to market was a huge challenge in the enterprise space. So I was partnered with a friend of mine, also a classmate from IIT Madras, and we developed essentially working back from what Mastercard needed, right? So we did a couple of projects for them, and we said, hey, here is what is possible with the LLMs and the state of art. And it's those capabilities are now slowly being absorbed by the likes of Salesforce, right? Like the likes of HubSpot, and they're now providing equivalent things where you could essentially figure out if I want to sell to a particular client or a particular industry. This is how you would go about it. Who are your right contacts? What is the message that you would lead with if you want to approach these contacts? What were the other interactions that these target leads would have had with other parts of your organization? So this is like a big data problem, and you could essentially, with the help of LLMs, churn through and provide an outreach that is hyper customized for that particular customer. Of course, the moment we built it, Mastercard went through a huge reorg, and they were not in a position to sort of move forward very quickly, which was one of the learnings for us. Right, enterprises are large lumbering beasts, and they take a lot of time to make those decisions. And the landscape was shifting so fast in terms of hey, the models are evolving very fast,
Very
the
true.
capabilities are getting longer and longer, and the reality we were encountering was hey, these sales cycles are anywhere from 6 to 12 months. The enterprise sales is actually sort of like a gamble, if you will. So you either hit it big, or you essentially spend a lot of time and with like no outcome at the end of it. So we decided to pivot, and then like I sort of started on this voice journey a bit more by myself. And then I moved from trying to target enterprises to trying to target SMBs. And like I said, hey, voice was sort of coming up and coming early in 2025, is getting stronger and better. The models are improving. So this trajectory will go on for another 2 or 3 years before people can tell apart an AI from human. I think you can still tell apart an AI from human, but 2 or 3 years down the line, it will be super hard. And I
Yeah.
just want to be along on this journey.
Right, right, right. Yeah. So now, no, that's a good background on that stuff. So now that you have solved the business problem of really making sure, operationally restaurants can focus more on serving the customer from taking away the operational front of ordering. Now we'll move into the tech stack. Like how basically, I mean, the folks on the show are even engineers, So if we could go under the hood, like you have, I'm assuming, a lot of the innate and orchestration workflows have been set up. You must have used Gemini, Cloud, or OpenAI in parallel, or so if you can just talk a little bit about that, like with whom you have partnered and what kind
Yeah,
of platforms you have utilized and tech stack as such.
yeah, absolutely. And I find this personally very fascinating because I'm the core technologist on this team, and I can talk about this for hours. But at a very high level, there are two things, right? Like, an infra part of it, and then there's an intelligence layer. So
Mhm.
we can touch briefly on the infra part, which is sort of like how you do a Zoom call or, a Teams meeting. It's sort of like a conference backbone where there is a room, and then there's a participant that joins, and then there could be multiple participants, right? And then there could be AI in the room as another participant. So this is something called a WebRTC protocol. I think this started with Zoom, if I'm not wrong, and it became like open source, very widely adopted. And this protocol, and you could essentially just run a virtual machine or a container in the cloud, and you could essentially set it up to be the host of this conference room. And then when somebody calls in, the caller sort of joins that room, and then the AI is automatically pulled into the room. And based on which number the caller has called, the AI can dynamically retrieve context and then say, hey, this call is for a customer in Richmond or a customer in Charlotte or a customer in Kansas. And it can essentially say, hey, this is how I need to sort of take the conversation forward. So that's the infra layer, right? On top of the infra layer is your intelligence layer, if you will. And this intelligence layer has multiple components within that. So you could essentially, the best analogy is that of a human, right? So in this case, if you want to think of a front desk person, they have ears, they have a mouth, they're thinking, and then they have hands, right? So that's the best way to think about it. So, and then each part of the stack has its own challenges. So ears, you get all kinds of noises coming in,
Very
and
true.
you don't want to actually pay attention to all the noises, like a baby crying or dishes clanking in the back. You want to actually listen to what the customer is saying. So we use something called a voice activity detection, which fires off only when there is human voice detected. And this is something that actually runs on the same virtual machine or the hardware where you have the agents and everybody collaborating. Like I said, the conference room equivalent. So once we detect voices, then we actually have to send it to get transcribed. So the voice activity detection says, hey, when is the human speech beginning and when is it ending? And then once it ends, you actually go get it to be transcribed. And then there are a bunch of options there. There are real-time transcriptions, there are, slower batch transcriptions, and there are a variety of trade-offs. And without sort of going
Right.
into all the detail,
Yeah.
we basically use one of the more capable models and we trade off latency for accuracy. So you could essentially say, hey, I want like a really fast performing low latency model, but then you would be trading off on accuracy of the transcription. So because with restaurants, it's super important for you to get the order accurate and to understand the customer well, because again, there are very unique dish names like our first customer, it's a South Indian restaurant. They have dish names that honestly I have not heard of. So it becomes very important to get the voice detection and transcription extremely right. And then the brain, the ears are done, and then the message has gone to the brain. And then the brain has to basically, synthesize the message. And then this is where the LLM comes in. And then you have a choice of LLMs, obviously OpenAI, Anthropic. These are things that everybody know. And we use pretty much OpenAI for our brains at
Hmm.
this point. And then
Yeah.
we're constantly on the lookout for, hey, what are the best models? If an equivalent intelligence model with a better latency comes in, we'll start using that. And this is where, hey, the same system, it continues to improve over time as we plug in new models, if you will. So, and then the hands part of it comes. It's like, hey, you can't just say, hey, I added a dish to your order. You actually have to go ahead and use your hands, the metaphorical hands, and then add the order to your cart. So these are something called tool calls that LLMs can do. So they would actually send an API request and then with all the details that are needed, right? And then there are some retry mechanisms. And then if there are some clarifications, here is where the integration with the point of sale systems becomes important where you say, hey, you can't just place an order for a dish. You also need to specify the spice level, and sometimes you have to specify whether it's like wet or dry.
Yes.
And all of these things come in, and then sometimes it's not very clear, so you need to confirm with the customer back and forth. So all of these come into picture.
And even dietary restrictions for that matter, whether it's a vegan or,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you need to actually, like, really high level overview of the entire menu. But also, if you want to get into any particular dish, you need to actually be able to query that dish and get the information that may not be there. And with LLMs, you might have heard of prompt engineering or
yeah,
context engineering
right.
as being very critical.
Context is huge right now.
Yes, and you can't have all the context stuffed into the menu. You need to be very selective about how you sort of dynamically engineer the context you are presenting to the agent. And then once that is done, the action is done, you speak back to the customer and then say, hey, I have added, an item to your order. And then the voices again are very configurable. I think for the restaurant that you spoke with, we have a very Indian-ish accent which actually makes the customers feel at home. And once the order is done, there's other downstream integrations. You have to actually push that order into the point of sale system. And then you might actually get a SMS saying, hey, your order is confirmed and is ready for pickup or will be ready for pickup. And then there are other integrations that we are looking into where people want to say, hey, we want to pay for this order and whatnot. So it's a quite involved tech stack, both the infra layer as well as the intelligence layer on top. I think the bit that the likes of Y Combinator and others say these are startup accelerators, right? Don't build a business for what works now, build a business for that will really thrive when the models get stronger. And I think
That's
like we're on that journey here where it is able to add a ton of value today, but then when these models improve and when the capabilities get stronger, the experience is going to be that much smoother. And at some point in the future, the default will change from online ordering to calling up the restaurant and ordering via voice. That's what I'm pretty much betting on, right?
yeah. I mean, this is great, Vamsi. Like you have literally walked us through and given a relatable terms of the ears and hands and the mouth and all that associating with the entire pipeline. So it's like somebody wants to order a large butter chicken, extra naan, and specifics processing that takes from like speech to text to intent parsing. menu lookup and everything, point of sale, as you said, it's all under 2 seconds. So just like how we say fast foods, now it's a data pipeline. It's dressed up for a yeah, as a conversation. So we heard something with another founder, who was on our podcast as well, is that most systems work perfectly in test environments, but break during peak load. Right. In your case, I don't know what would be the peak load. Is it 7 p.m. on a Friday, maybe?
Yeah, that's pretty close to peak. Fridays, Saturdays, those are peak. Yeah.
Okay. So what actually breaks in that moment? And like, if you could just specify, like, how you designed around it actually.
Yeah. So, great questions. So, there are two components to it, right? Like, for instance, the infra layer, going back to my analogy, you would need more compute when more calls are coming in. And the good thing is, my entire tech stack is hosted on AWS. And if I say, hey, for these peak periods, I need extra container or two to come up, we could essentially dynamically pre-schedule that. The good thing with restaurants is we know the load characteristics. It's not like, on a Monday at 11 a.m., you're going to see a spike in orders. That's not going to happen. So we can pre provision, and if need be, we can even dynamically provision that based on things like CPU usage, memory usage, and whatnot. I think the other bit that is not as obvious to folks is right now, when there is a lot of hits to LLMs, right, their latency can actually be very variable, right? You're making an OpenAI call and you're expecting some kind of response to come in. So typically it could be anywhere from, second to a second and a half for the kind of setup that I have for the context that I provide. But then there are instances where, this could essentially go to 2 or 3 seconds or even 5 seconds in cases. And that actually, makes this suboptimal because that's not the only thing happening. There are, like I said, pre-processing, post-processing, and a bunch of other things. So the good thing is OpenAI has very recently started promoting their priority tiers, which is to say, hey, even when there is a lot of uh, traffic from other sources, prioritize my requests. These requests are a little bit more expensive, but I think just for voice conversations, it makes sense to go to this priority tier and then, get your requests fulfilled faster. The good thing, though, that I have seen is with these LLMs themselves, the peak happens during office hours, and then there is not that big of an issue during evening hours, which is when the restaurant traffic spikes up. So in some ways, these are very complementary. And so far, I have not seen an issue with OpenAI being very laggy in terms of its request response latencies.
I see. So once the architecture is live, right, and you've taken care of all this latency and availability and all the integrations in place, like how does it look like on the operator's side? More importantly, what data? This is where Vio excels as a company. What data is generated that restaurants have never had before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a portal for the restaurants where they can essentially log in and then look at, hey, how many calls have come in, and how many of those calls actually get converted into orders. These numbers are typically, like, as a benchmark, anywhere from 40 to 60% actually get converted to orders. A lot of times these are essentially spam calls or people calling in to figure out if the restaurant is open, or sometimes they are coming in and they say, hey, do you have tea available today? And if it's available, they would come in and then they would order tea and they would do something else. So a lot of these are actually informational calls. And then there is also the salespeople who wants to, sell whatever to the restaurant. So we see a bunch of these calls. And the good thing is the restaurant can now say, hey, here is, like, the various categories of calls that I got. And they can actually read those transcripts and then say, hey, here is an upsell that the bot was able to accomplish. Because they may say, no, I want a biryani, but then the bot will offer a lassi or a gulab jamun, and then they end up taking it. And a lot of times, what I have seen is even if they don't end up taking the bot up on it, it's there at the back of their mind, and then they go to the restaurant for pickup, and then at the counter they'll say, okay, whatever, let me get the gulab jamun. So
Yes.
net net, there is actually, like,
Yeah, cross selling is always
yeah, yeah, it's been working pretty well, I would say.
okay. Okay. So, I mean, for someone who is hearing about voice HQ for the first time, your numbers are hard to ignore, like zero missed calls, 80% fewer order errors, 8% higher ticket size, and 60% lower order entry cost. and you're live in 48 hours, that's the output. Here is what I want to explore with you, because this is where it gets interesting from a data standpoint. So there are two-part questions, Vamsi. What does the dashboard look like for a restaurant operator today? Which actually you touched on some of them, but what are they actually seeing, and where does the data maturity journey go from here? Like predictive inventory, demand forecasting, any personalization by caller ID?
Yes.
What level 3 for a restaurant running your system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a couple of directions this could go in, right? Like reordering. If a customer calls back, if we know what they have ordered in the past, we could proactively say, hey, do you want to repeat your last order? And these are things that we are exploring around the edges. But as I talk to the restaurant owners, the more immediate need is more around fraud and chargebacks and that sort of a thing. So there are today calls that come in that even with humans, right? It doesn't matter whether it's AI or human, that actually doesn't get picked up at the end of the day. And then even when the order is via online, you try to figure out, hey, is this card going to charge back after I fulfill the order? Right. And these are pain points for the restaurants that are sort of in any, I would say, category, not just like South Indian restaurants or Indian restaurants for that matter. And there is a need for more analytics in the space. They want to say, hey, which caller has called but not has picked up? Where are the calls coming from? Is there a way to actually score the risk on some of these calls? Because in a small percentage of the cases, they may want to hold on to the order and then call the customer back. And they are looking to sort of explore some of these nuances. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here because these restaurants, as you know, have pretty thin margins. And you want to be like really good on the operational front on, hey, who's calling, where are the orders coming from? Should I actually confirm with the customer and call back? And the calling back part of it can also be something that can be automated. Uh, the other bit that comes into picture is for the restaurants, reviews are super important, right? And if you have had a customer with really good experience, then you may want to call them back and then say, hey, looks like you ordered like 3 times in the past 1 month. Can you actually drop a Google review, right? And people won't proactively go and drop these reviews. So there are these kinds of like outbound opportunities that come into play, and we're just looking to sort of you know figure out what is the right consolidated package that we could offer to restaurant owners. And these are like longer term journeys, right? We're
Yeah,
not looking to do there's a whole ton that could be done in the space. But yeah.
that's that's true. But one thing you mentioned about Vamsi, about the payment thing. Where is it happening in the life cycle? The voice agent will take the order, right? And eventually the order is placed, and the person goes to the restaurant to pick up the order. That's where they are giving their credit card, right? At the point of sale. So basically, do you see fraud happening that the credit card will be declined, but it gives the immediate right away, right?
Yeah, there are two pieces, right? So sometimes customers call in, but the order doesn't get picked up, right?
I see. I see. Okay.
And then it could be essentially a competitor placing an order, or it could actually be, in some really rare cases, it could be employees actually placing orders through their friends, which becomes like unpicked order. And then, some of these employees can go back home with the unpicked orders because nobody wants to throw food away.
That's a level. That's a different level of waste and abuse.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And these are the things that we want to say. We want to actually do. Sometimes you actually get calls from Google Voice numbers with numbers hidden, and then there needs to be like special handling for these calls.
Got it.
In some cases, we actually redirect the calls to the restaurant direct, right, without actually having the bot intervene and take the order. So as you like you said, hey, everything looks good in theory. When you put it in
Yeah.
production, you
Mhm.
see a bunch of these edge cases.
Yeah.
And going back, even to the restaurant, even after the card is paid, the customer can actually raise a dispute later on. And then if you had like bad experience with a customer on a particular order,
Mhm.
there is some tracking mechanism that some restaurants basically say, hey, if the same customer identity calls back, let me just make sure that the customer in fact really wants this, because this card or this customer resulted in us sort of losing some money in the past, right? Because if there's a chargeback, the customer not only gets refunded, there's a $25 or a $50 fee that your payment processor levies on you, right? So these are some of the things that restaurants are very sensitive to.
Got you. Got you. Especially if it's a mom and a pop shop,
Exactly.
then everything counts. But that brings me to the next question actually. The voice AI space for restaurants is getting crowded fast, right? So, SoundHound, just landed Red Lobster across 500 locations. So, Slang AI raised 20 million. Converse now, Presto, Laman AI, as well as Capitalized, all pushing hard, right? So, most founders use this moment to pitch their differentiation. I want to flip it to your thing is what is the one thing your best funded competitor is doing that you genuinely respect and that actively makes you a better builder?
Yeah, yeah. I think Soundhound, to your point, they have been around for a really long time, and I think like hats off to them. They were able to sort of they were the first movers in the space. They grew a lot. They got like the likes of Chipotle and like you said, others in the space, and they have done something unique in the space, and they provided the visibility right for the space. I think the challenge is essentially, hey, how do I differentiate myself? How does AI voice issue sort of pitch to the right restaurant? So one is primarily we think we have a better product because we are riding on the shoulders of giants. When I say that, a lot of times the likes of SoundHound want to create everything in house, the whole tech stack that I have created. So it becomes a comparison between a closed architecture and an open architecture. So we have adopted an open architecture where we would say, hey, we'll get the best of the breed voice recognition models. We'll get the best of the breed, best latency LLM models. And for speech synthesis, again, we'll go and figure out like, hey, what are the available options and we can customize it for customers. And this lets us sit in a different spectrum of latency versus accuracy. And also we're looking at things where the menus are very complex. Like, for example, the customers that I have currently in production, they have up to 400 items on their menu, which is actually very unheard of if you go to, like, Chipotle or a Red Lobster or whatever. I think the closest that comes to is in terms of that menu size is Cheesecake Factory. They have close to, like, 250 or so items on the menu. So we're looking to essentially hit up those quick service restaurants have large menus, quite a bit of customization. Been in talks with one pizza chain where they do like, hey, you can do half and half pizza. Like one half of the pizza, you have some menu items, and the other half, you have some other toppings and whatnot. And when you're looking at a setup like that, uh, you really need like, absolute cutting edge models with like a higher tier of intelligence to be able to get the order absolutely right. And like I said, hey, if you're building it for Chipotle, you could actually run with a, in-house model, small model, and you could actually like, give better latencies. And that's where I think how we are positioning ourselves is different from the leaders, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, knowing your competitors' strengths is actually a form of data intelligence, by itself. So, Vamsi, would you actually walk through any of the use case? Maybe that will be of interest
Yeah,
for our audience.
absolutely. So we've been speaking so long about, the voice bot. So what better than just directly calling the bot live and then trying
Absolutely.
to place an order and check out the experience. Let's see.
Testo.
Do you have any paneer curries on your menu?
Yes, we have several paneer curries available. Some popular options are paneer butter masala, paneer tikka masala, methi paneer, tamka paneer, paneer cashew curry, and
I'll
masala
get the
kurma.
methi paneer.
Got it. One medium methi paneer. Would you like to add any bread, rice, or something else to go with that?
I'll get the chicken tikka masala too.
One medium chicken tikka masala added. Would you like to add some naan or rice to go with your curries?
Yeah, I'll get one butter naan and two garlic naans.
One butter naan and two garlic naans added. Would you like to add a drink or dessert like mango lassi or gulab jamun to your order today? हमारे पास ड्रिंक्स में मैंगो लासी, लिम्का, थम्स अप और रूह अफ़ज़ा गो है। डेजर्ट में गुलाब जामुन, रसमलाई, डबल का मीठा मैंगो केक और तिरुनेलवेली हलवा जैसी कई मिठाइयाँ हैं। क्या इनमें से कुछ ट्राई करना चाहें?
I'll get the double ka meetha.
One double ka meetha added. Would you like to add anything else or should I review your order?
Go ahead and review the order, please.
Here's your order. One medium methi paneer, one medium chicken tikka masala, one butter naan, two garlic naans, and one double ka meetha. Does everything look correct? Or would you like to make any changes?
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
You will get the confirmation message by text. Thank you for calling. Have a good day.
So yeah, that was that.
That it's making me feel hungry now. That's excellent, actually. The
I'll
way
get
you
that tonight.
ordered, yeah, I mean, it's a simply fantastic use case demonstration. It's like you ordered something, you modified something, you asked it to review the order, and it's right, summed it up pretty well. It didn't lose context anywhere in the process. So,
Yeah,
yeah, kudos to you, Vamsi, for putting such an excellent product in the market. It's,
yeah,
testing it in and out,
yeah, yeah. And you can switch languages. It detected Hindi and then it switched.
Yes, absolutely.
And then yeah, it's I think a great product, and I think as models improve, these things are going to get better over time. And like I said, in a couple of years, it will be probably hard to distinguish between what's human versus what's AI.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that actually brings up like, what is your, since we have founders and community at large technology folks watching this show, what is your advice? Basically, I mean, now that we had such an excellent demo, I'm sure a lot of folks might be wondering, how do I build like a classy product like this? And what challenges, what advice do you have for investors, or rather pitch to investors and advice for engineering community at large?
Yeah, I think two things there. So let me unbundle them. So in terms of the pitch to the technologists in general, I think yeah, whether you're an employee at a large company or whether you're trying to do your own thing, the most important thing is to actually be very comfortable with what is happening on the AI side of things. Whatever your actually social media is, whether it's LinkedIn or whether you're on X or something else, I would say follow the topics like hey AI, like what's OpenAI releasing, what's Anthropic releasing, and there is a ton of material out there. And go ahead and download and use things like Claude Cowork, right? Or there is the ChatGPT desktop app, and these things are extremely powerful, and it's very hard to communicate the power of these without actually having somebody install and use these things, right?
Very
And
true.
for those of you who are actually on the cutting edge, and if you know your security stuff really well, you could get into things like OpenClaw, which is like an agent that you could install, and it could be in your WhatsApp. I have a few private groups where my friends and family, they chat with my OpenClaw, and these things are essentially some things that open your mind up into what is possible. So that's on the sort of my advice for somebody who is on the technology journey, whether you're a founder or whether you're an employee at a large firm. Just play around with it. There is no substitute to getting your hands dirty, and no amount of reading and watching on TV does justice in my mind. In terms of hey, what does this mean for the markets, the investors, and whatnot? I think we have seen a lot of this actually also play out in the sense that the gap between Mag 7 and the rest has started to widen for a few years, and I think AI has only accelerated. There is a lot of talk about hey, how SaaS is going to be impacted. Yeah, I think some of that is probably going to continue for a little bit. Again, I'm not in the business of forecasting, but I guess if you say, hey, here is an interesting thing, and there will be a lot of efforts. People will try a few things. So be kind to those people if they're trying things out, I would say, because I'm on the receiving end of it. And the other bit is now that you bring up, we are looking to actually, raise a little bit of a pre-seed fund, if you will. So in a few weeks, we'll be hitting the road with our investor deck and whatnot. But again, this is in the spirit of, hey, we have a working product, we have happy customers, and we want to get the word out. And to your point, hey, all my competitors have raised a lot of money, and they are trying to sort of, grab the land grab in the wild west, right? So it's going to be competitive, but again, we believe we have very distinct advantages in the sense of where we have positioned ourselves relative to our competitors. So it's going to be a massive market. I believe is probably going to it's something that everybody is underestimating in terms of what can be done in the space, and in a couple of years it'll become really really obvious when your voice workflows become front and center for every organization. So that's what the bet is on. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say on this front.
Yeah, no, thank you, Vamsi. I think there is a piece of pie for everybody in the market. So I think what uniquely is available with your product may be different from other products as such. So one thing I noticed in your product is it's able to, you can do a lot of context switching and still it is able to still maintain that context in view actually. That being said, we are down to our lightning round, which we generally go with getting to know you better a little bit and the company as such. Just a quick few questions. So, what is the most embarrassing thing the AI has ever said to a customer during a live order?
That's a tough one. So there were like, in the very early days of going live, the AI would essentially say they would call and order for a special item that was available there. Richmond was the first location that went live. And if you know Richmond, they have something called DB5 specials, and which is a $5, happy hour special. And I had like
I
no
see.
idea that they had this thing. And all the customers started calling for DB5, and it's like, it simply didn't get it. And then it'd be like, trying to sort of cross sell them something. And then the customers would be like frustrated until I sort of trained the model to tell what it is. So, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. The point is, like, you were focusing on the logs and eventually, took that as a feedback loop and trained it right away. So the go to market is pretty quick in terms of features and functionality.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part, right? Like you can deploy a system, but then it's sort of like it has to fit like a glove. And the first time you try a glove, it's like uncomfortable. But over time, they just get smoothened out, and then like you'd want to wear that glove again and keep it forever. So it's a journey. It doesn't
Yes,
like happen
absolutely.
on day one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. So if a Series A investor said SoundHound already owns enterprise, why will you win? Your one sentence answer is?
We are actually get towards more complex workflows and more intelligent models where our open framework helps you evolve much faster than closed alternatives like SoundHound.
Wonderful. So, one skill you would tell every engineering student to build right now that most university curriculum are still not teaching.
AI, of course.
Even further down in AI, I think a lot of the engineering curriculum has caught up with.
Yeah,
It's amazing how fast they caught up with the curriculum. Actually,
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I have not sort of looked at the latest sort of the coursework and what they are teaching these days, but I have a couple of youngsters working with me, and they have been through the courses around machine learning, around like embeddings and
I see.
whatnot, and the pace at which AI is moving is super fast. Right, today people have moved on from learning about some of those concepts, and they are now trying to figure out, hey, how can I essentially do vibe coding is a bad word in the sense that hey, you just push out code that doesn't have like proper guardrails and everything set in, but it's how do you do proper vibe engineering is probably a better idea, right? Like you're engineering the solution to actually solve a business problem, and you're taking care and you're actually setting it up in such a way that there are guardrails and all of that. So I would say, hey, really learn the engineering bit of it, and the interaction with AI is you're sort of more like a manager and less like a doer. And how do you develop those skills?
Yeah.
And the people who win in this new world are probably people who are going to be having a lot of agency, which is like, hey, you just need to go out and do things. Lack of knowledge used to be a barrier, but it no longer is, right? So agency and then taste. So if you're able to build a product that a lot of people will like, you have a niche. So good designers, people who are out and about, yeah, I think the future is going to be theirs.
Okay. So the most overhyped thing in AI right now is blank blank, and the most underhyped thing is blank blank. So
Yeah, the most underhyped thing is voice, I think, in
uh,
many ways. I feel the potential is so huge. I'm sort of making a bet on that. Probably the most overhyped thing I would say is this is a tough one, and I think what is happening, and the reason I would say this is
is it
AI
AI is going to replace the jobs? Is it overhyped?
uh, AI going to replace the jobs? No, the jobs are not going to be replaced. The jobs are going to be very different. I'm actually a huge believer in, hey, the typewriters became a thing, and from
Yeah.
typewriters we came to computers, we started generating more documents. So there is substantially more work to do, and people will essentially find ways to be more productive. What I'm bearish on, what I think is probably overhyped, is people will say, hey, AI will close your deals. AI will essentially, like,
Yeah.
build business for you. I think that bit is like quite a bit overhyped.
Yeah.
And right now, all the channels that we have, like our inboxes or WhatsApp messages, and very soon, like our social media is going to be inundated with what is called AI slop. And in that domain, I think like what matters is personal connection, like, authentic relationships. I think there was another guest recently on your podcast who said, reviews are broken right now. And it
Yes,
needs to be
absolutely.
like, so that's where when people say, hey, AI SDRs, I'm bearish on that.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm glad you are subscribed to our channel and basically it's adding value, definitely. The podcast of the guest was gave us deep dive into Google platform, and she's building a product and solving another problem. So yeah, thank you for that. Actually, I think my one of the last question is like, what problem keeps you up at night and that you haven't started building yet?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, number one, for me, it's like the go to market engine, right? Like I said, hey, I have a product that works really well. I need to sort of build this team that can take the value proposition, put it in front of the right customers and start the engagement. So, that's on the business side. On the technical side, I think it's more of like, hey, how do I create like my pipelines, not just to sort of serve the customers well. If there is a new model that comes in tomorrow, how quickly can I adopt that new model and make my pipeline better? So that's what actually is like on the technical side, the thing that keeps me up. And there is a lot of prerequisites for that. You need to have like a really good evaluation set, and you need to basically say, hey, if I swap that model in with something else, how well is it going to perform in these edge cases? So we have a lot of that, but there is always more work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And especially there's every week there's a new model. So definitely testing it out, putting in production, having downtime,
yeah.
it's just a work by itself. So I totally agree. So we're end of this show, Vamsi, and I really want to thank you so much by, diving deep down. And I totally enjoyed the use case demo that you
Thank you.
provided. And definitely, I personally have used your product as such in placing orders at this restaurant. And it's exactly the kind of conversation we build in this podcast. And you have given students also a real career arc to study, and basically, engineers, production reality check, and investors, a company worth keeping a close watch on. So for everyone in the audience, you can experience AI Voice HQ right now, by placing an order, and you can talk to the system Vamsi has built. So they're more convincing than a slide deck. So that was
Absolutely.
purpose of this whole podcast. And if anybody wants to connect with you, Vamsi, as an investor or just to learn the lessons, and journey of an entrepreneur is never easy, I would say, then so where would they contact you?
So I'm on LinkedIn with my last name. I think it'll probably be in the show notes, I guess, if you can add to that. And
Yes.
aivoicesq.com is my website. My personal phone number is there, along with the demo number. So call the demo number, call my personal number, text me. I'm available. And yeah, you can also reach me at Vamsi at aivoicesq.com. So looking forward to all the feedback and, all the good words or, any opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, thank you so much again, Vamsi. Again, for all our audience, enjoy the show and feel free to try out the voice agent. And in case you need to reach out to us, it is our website links and everything are posted in the descriptions. For
Thank
now,
you so much.
signing
It was
off.
a pleasure being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you again, Vamsi.
Have a good one.